I think you made reference last time we talked to uranium.
Oh yeah,
That as an
love
industry and
uranium.
is, yeah.
Love
Are
it.
you still hot on that or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, let's go through all of the mistakes that have been made in the European Union in relationship to Putin, Russia, and Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing that they do is they come out and they do all these sanctions. Well, how did that work out for them? Right? I would argue that those sanctions impacted the European Union far more negatively
Agreed.
than it impacted Russia. But you see that the price of energy just absolutely skyrockets to the point, unfortunately, where this winter, a lot of people over there might not be able to afford, just heating their home, which is, by the way, is another problem that we have here in the United States with diesel up in the Northeast as a result of these crazy policies towards Russia, which, I'm no fan of Russia, but I am a fan of doing something to them that will hurt us less than it hurts them. Kind of common sense and a cost benefit analysis. But anyway, let's go back to 1980. And we had the Green, or maybe it was 78. That's when the Green Party started in Germany. And their battle cry, one of their battle cries back then, Rich, was to get rid of nuclear. We got to get rid of nuclear, got to get rid of nuclear. So along in the 1990s, along comes this politician who's, of course, Machiavellian, and he sees an opportunity there. He doesn't care about the polar bears or the temperature in the ocean. He just sees this as an opportunity to usurp power and control. His name is Gerhard Schroeder. So Gerhard Schroeder comes along and he says, "Okay, Green Party, I'll go ahead and pander to you guys. And at the time he wasn't part of the Green Party, but he kind of combined them. And he said, okay, if I get elected, then I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this dirty, horrible nuclear energy." So he does that. In the early 2000s, he gets rid of the nuclear energy. But what does he replace it with? He replaces it with a pipeline going straight to Russia for nat gas called Nord Stream. Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Right. So in an effort to pander to his constituents, they take a source of a very, very clean energy and they replace it with something that's far more detrimental to the environment. And they make themselves completely dependent upon Russian nat gas, and therefore giving Putin all the leverage in the world. And so fast forward to today, when they go ahead and implement these sanctions, now what do they because they don't have the nat gas. So what are they having to transition to? Well, now they're having to use more coal, than they ever have in the last, let's say, 30 or 40 years. And some people are literally having to go out and cut down timber wood, like in their backyard, just to heat their house, which has probably a bigger impact on the environment than coal does. So my point here is that all these central planners and authoritarians and all these people, excuse me, that are really Malthusians at heart. I call them the Malthusian cult. And that's the World Economic Forum. That's the EU, the UN, the IMF, and all of their cronies. And unfortunately, they've got a lot of influence over corporate America as well. But these people truly believe that there are too many human beings on the planet Earth relative to the amount of scarce resources we have. So they have two objectives. One is to make sure that people use less energy, and they're doing a very good job of that right now in Europe. And number two is to decrease the population, like Bill Gates always talks about. But, they won't say, well, we want to absolutely kill people, but they'll say, well, we want to reduce the population growth, or we want to reduce the birth rate, something like that. So these are their two objectives, going all the way back to when Klaus started the World Economic Forum in 1971, right? And the Club of Rome in 1968. You guys can do all the research. I've done a lot of whiteboard videos on this. But the point here is that climate change is just a Trojan horse. It's just a way to allow them to use a marketing tool, right, to really package what their true objectives are, because using less energy, therefore lowering the standard of living for the entire globe, or just killing, half the people, half the population, call it 4 billion people, that doesn't really sell. So you got to use some marketing strategy there and package it a different way. So my point is, we see this climate change narrative, and I'm all for clean air. I want to be very, very clear. But what I'm saying is the people pushing this narrative most of them, especially at the top, they don't care about clean air. They only care about those two objectives: usurping power and control. Right.
What do you
So
think's in it for them? Because I always like to ask that question when it comes to these ideas. Like, what's in it for these conglomerates to reduce and eliminate more of the population?
There's several things there. First and foremost, it's their religion. They truly believe they're doing good. So I think if you and I sat down with Klaus and had a couple beers, I don't think he would come out and say, ha 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 ha, I love murdering people. I think he would exactly
right.
Exactly. I think he would say, listen, the fact of the matter is that Thomas Malthus was right, that if we have exponential population growth in a world with limited resources, at some point that has to bring down the standard of living for all the people in the world, because energy is the economy. People have to realize that.
Mm.
You can look at a chart of our energy use globally, and it tracks perfectly with GDP growth and the global population. So if we have access to more and more energy, if we're able to use more energy, that's going to increase the standard of living for the people in aggregate total. So if we have access to less energy because the population is growing exponentially and the amount of energy you have access to flatlines, the only thing that can happen is the standard of living coming down. So Klaus would say, we don't want that to happen. So in order to prevent that, unfortunately, we've got to make some hard decisions. And a hard decision is we've got to create an equilibrium between the population and the environment in which we live and the amount of resources that we have access to. And in order to do that, you've got to reduce the energy use in the rich countries, and you've got to reduce the population in the poor countries. And why would he say that? Because the poor countries are the ones that they really have to focus on, because they're the ones that go from, first of all, right now, they're using a lot less energy than we are in the West, right? And if you've ever been to like Ecuador or something like that, you know what I'm talking about. They're living in a brick kind of hut thing here, and they're riding around on a bicycle. But what happens is, as their GDP grows, then they use more and more energy, because they go from riding a bicycle to riding a scooter, and then they go from riding a scooter to driving a little car, and then they go to driving a truck, and then what they eat changes as well. They go from just eating rice, and then they start eating more and more protein. Well, protein requires a lot of energy. And so the Klaus types, they see that and they say, okay, well, we understand that human beings are hardwired to always want something better for themselves and for their children and for the generations to come. So we can't prevent them from going from a bicycle to a moped. That ain't going to happen. So what we have to do is we just have to lower the population in those areas that have those types of or that, basically everyone is going to want that opportunity. So we just have to decrease the population in aggregate total. Now, I think they'd say that, maybe after 2 beers, Klaus would say, okay, well, we want to do that by just discouraging population growth, just like the one-child policy in China, as an example. So we just want to, promote birth control, or we want to promote the idea that people should just have 1 child or 2 children or whatever. But I think after about 4 or 5 beers, then it would turn a little darker as far as the conversation. And it would go from, well, we need to promote having fewer children, to we need to enforce this from a top-down standpoint. And then maybe after 10 beers, you get to the Thanos plan, which is what I call it. And if you saw that movie, exactly, you got it.
So, I mean, here's what's really interesting about that. I know Justin Trudeau is one of Klaus Schwab's best buddies.
Oh, he's a disciple. He's like a Klaus Schwab mini-me.
Yeah, and there was an article or a conversation piece that came out from Max Bernier, who's like the main opposition, who doesn't even have a seat in parliament, but he's the guy saying, we need we need a little more freedom, less rules, lower taxes, get out of my life, stay out of my pockets, and get the hell out of here sort of thing. And Trudeau's been talking about increasing the immigration rates into Canada, which kind of contrasts, the whole notion of lowering population density, energy usage, and all that, right? And I think the number was doubling, if I'm not mistaken. So why double your immigration rates into Canada if you're drunk on the Klaus Schwab Kool-Aid to lower the population, reduce population, lower energy consumption, when that in theory would be the opposite? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think number one, it's part of this woke narrative. So a lot of times that conflicts with the overall main objectives of the global elite. But also, too, if you look at what truly does lower population, it's when people become richer. So, and Bill Gates will tell you that it's when people become healthier. That's complete BS. He's just trying to sell you, some oceanfront property in Arizona just to push his narrative. But when people get richer, they do have fewer kids. And so that could be it when they're trying to bring all these people from maybe poorer countries into the richer countries, assuming that their standard of living will increase. Therefore, they'll reproduce a lot less.
That's an interesting theory. Okay. So take them out of an environment where they'd normally have four or five kids, put them in one where they might have one or two.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but to put them into an environment where they will vote for you so you can continually stay in power.
Well, they
That may
clearly
be
do
another
that.
thing.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of reasons why they may push that narrative or that agenda.
It doesn't seem to be slowing down, though, does it?
No, in fact, it's well.
I mean, like the craziness.
Yeah. What I always say is that every night I go to bed and I think to myself, well, the good news is it can't get any crazier. And then I wake up the next morning and read the news.
I it's funny. I did this reaction piece to Jordan Peterson's 3-part series on the Daily Wire about encouraging guys to marry. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch it on the Unplugged Alpha podcast. It's from like 2 weeks ago. And because I subscribed to the Daily Wire, I figured, I'd check out what was on it. And I saw this one that caught my eye, which was What is a Woman by Matt Walsh. And
right.
I don't know, that was a 90-minute train wreck. Like by the end of it, by the time I was done, I just looked at my girl and I was like, I don't really belong in this world. Like, I don't agree with any of this. That's not me. I'm not in my head here. It's just,
I can totally relate, Rich. I can totally relate.
It's like, where are we going here, man? Like, is this really what's becoming so common? And every time, I look around, it's like, well, that's batshit crazy. And there's more of this batshit crazy stuff over here. And it's like, am I the only one that's still sane? That whole code in the matrix sort of thing. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here and pin down below in the top comment. You'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.